Hi, I'm Kenneth. I learned something new this week.
This week, I learned about completed staff work, what to do to make sure I complete the staff work, and what mistakes to avoid, and I am sharing it with you.
Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a serious look at how to transform all that organizational friction, the endless Slack threads, those soul-crushing, just checking in email chains, and turn them into a streamlined culture of absolute reliability. We are going to dive into a doctrine that literally has the power to completely reshape how your team operates. We're talking about moving away from constant firefighting and finally getting into a state of pure strategic clarity. Let's get right into it.
So, let me ask you a blunt question. Are you a leader or are you an overpaid researcher? I know, it's a little direct, but it cuts straight to the heart of this silent crisis that's happening in boardrooms everywhere right now. Have you ever felt that gnawing mental exhaustion when a team member brings you a problem, but it's just in fragments, and they kind of expect you to piece together the solution? Think about a time someone messaged you saying, "Hey, the client hated the draft. What should we do?" Right? That is what we call the ping-pong effect. It's this relentless back and forth of half-baked ideas and super vague reports. What it does is it shifts the burden of critical thinking upward, which means leaders get bogged down doing the work of their subordinates. It is definitely time to break that cycle.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that the cure for our modern corporate time crisis actually originates from a pretty high-stakes environment, World War II. Back in 1942, Colonel Archer J. Larch penned the doctrine of completed staff work. Just imagine being a commanding officer coordinating troop movements, right? If a junior officer brings you half a map and a guess about enemy positions, that incomplete information could literally cost lives. Now, in our corporate world, it costs capital, it costs reputation and market position. The goal here is simple: deliver a product so incredibly complete that the only thing left for the leader to do is just approve or disapprove.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The time crisis. 2. Completed staff work defined. 3. The workflow and principles. 4. Training the mindset. 5. Common pitfalls. And 6. Sustainable success. All right, moving into Section 2, completed staff work defined. Let's look at what this paradigm shift actually entails.
At its core, completed staff work, or CSW, is a really powerful management tool. Basically, it shifts the burden of critical thinking firmly back to the staff. It empowers your team to deliver finished products instead of fragmented puzzles. Because look, when accountability shifts upward, your organization gets sluggish and deadlines just get missed. CSW prevents all of that by ensuring the staff does the deep study, allowing the leader to remain exactly what they should be, a strategic decision maker. So what does the completed work actually look like in real life? Well, it is definitely not a massive rambling data dump. No, it's a single finalized document. It's brief, it's got all the necessary appendices and background data neatly attached right behind the executive summary, and it is entirely ready for a simple signature.
And that brings us to the dramatic focal point of this entire doctrine. We call it the signature test. This is absolutely the ultimate executive standard. Before any team member submits a piece of work, they have to stop and ask themselves, if I were the chief, would I be willing to sign this document and stake my professional reputation on its being right? If the answer is anything less than an emphatic yes, absolutely, then the work just isn't complete. This one simple question prevents so much sloppy work because it forces the creator to emotionally and professionally invest in the outcome. If it's not a yes, it has to go back, get refined, and be totally reworked until it is truly decision-ready. Okay, let's dive into this a bit deeper. Before a team member even touches a keyboard, a crucial psychological shift has to happen. We really have to move away from the employee mindset, just ticking boxes and constantly asking the boss what to do, over to the owner mindset. We like to call this step 0, be the boss. Think about it. If the staff member were ultimately responsible for the results, how would they approach the problem? Owning the results is the mandatory foundation of CSW. Without that mental shift, you're honestly just managing tasks. You aren't leading a capable team. So, Section 3, the workflow and principles. Let's look at the actual engine of CSW.
Now we're ready to pop the hood and see how this works. This is a highly disciplined, 9-step methodology broken down into 3 main phases: think, solve, and present. Let's really break this down. The think phase covers steps 1 to 3. You don't just dive headfirst into solutions here. You start by identifying the essential info and defining the true scope of the problem. Like, what is the actual goal? Step 2 is thorough research, gathering up all that raw data. And Step 3 is critical analysis, where you weigh that data against your organizational goals. Next up, we enter the solve phase, steps 4 to 6. This is where the magic happens, folks. Step 4 is crafting actionable recommendations. You're not just summarizing the problem anymore, you are deciding how to fix it. Step 5 involves building clear reports, creating that single finalized document we talked about earlier. Step 6 is super crucial. Review and refine. This is basically internal red teaming. The staff stress tests their own solution to find holes before the boss ever lays eyes on it. Finally, the present phase covers steps 7 to 9. Step 7 is presenting persuasively to leadership. Keep it brief, direct, and ready for a signature. Step 8 is handling feedback objectively, no getting defensive. And Step 9, the one everybody seems to forget, follow up. The staff monitors the implementation to make sure their recommendation actually achieved the tangible results they promised in the first place.
But look, a workflow is really just an empty checklist if you don't have the core principles driving it. Let's see how these first 4 principles perfectly embody the workflow steps we literally just covered. During the solve phase, specifically step 4, you have to apply the responsibility to advise. Leaders are not search engines. Staff must provide a single, well-reasoned recommendation rather than just tossing 3 equal options on the boss's desk and saying, you pick. Next, anticipation of needs is vital throughout the think and present phases. It means looking 3 steps ahead. For example, if you're pitching a project in step 7, do not wait to be asked for the budget. Anticipate that need and attach it right away. Thoroughness powers step 6, that review and refine stage. You have to check your blind spots from every possible angle to avoid stalling out. And of course, accountability is the absolute backbone of the entire process. You completely own the logic model of your advice and the final outcome in step 9.
Rounding out our 8 principles, we have clarity and precision. This is the absolute key to step 5, building your clear reports. You have got to eliminate industry jargon and really utilize executive summaries to respect the leader's time. Then there's confidentiality. This ensures psychological safety and trust up in the executive suite, which directly affects how you handle data during your research phase. Objectivity requires checking your ego and any departmental biases right at the door. It's the cornerstone of step 3, your critical analysis, ensuring your decisions are based purely on cold, hard facts. And finally, completeness. This is the bedrock of the entire present phase. It ensures the final product is entirely self-sufficient, answering literally every question so that the only action remaining is that all-important signature.
Moving right along to section 4, training the mindset. How do we actually build this?
So now that we know what to do, how do we get our teams to actually do it? Because mastering this doctrine is definitely not a one-day seminar kind of thing. It requires active application. Traditional, theory-heavy training usually fails because, honestly, it just goes in one ear and out the other. Instead, you want to begin by building a bite-sized SOP library using asynchronous tools, things like Loom and ClickUp. But knowledge by itself isn't enough, it requires application, and this builds into what we call the collaborative flight simulator. It's awesome. Just like training pilots in a simulator before they fly a real jet, you give your team a real, historical problem, maybe like a defunct client proposal from last year, and you ask them to produce a CSW standard recommendation in a totally safe practice zone. This whole learning by doing approach is wild. It can actually improve information retention by up to 82%.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Because personalizing this training is crucial. A one-size-fits-all approach is pretty much a guaranteed failure. By mapping your training tactics to the 4 Kolb learning styles, you really maximize your return on investment here. For diverging learners, the ones who are all about feeling and watching, they tend to imagine endless possibilities, so you want to use team-building exercises to ground them in practical goals. Now, assimilating learners love logical models, so you just point them straight to those SOP libraries. Your converging problem solvers, the folks who learn by doing and thinking, they will absolutely thrive in those flight simulator challenges we just talked about. Meanwhile, your intuitive accommodating learners should actually be encouraged to take on teaching roles, to share their successes with the rest of the team.
All right, section 5, common mistakes and pitfalls. Let's talk about what goes wrong.
And this brilliantly illustrates that adopting any new doctrine is definitely going to come with some friction. Let's troubleshoot why teams sometimes regress back into that exhausting ping-pong effect, and what you, as a manager, need to watch out for. The first major pitfall is the piecemeal tendency. This happens when staff starts submitting fragments the second a task gets difficult. As a manager, watch out for sudden, unscheduled, quick question meetings. That is very often the piecemeal tendency in disguise. Then there's a lack of psychological safety. If your staff fear making mistakes, they're going to constantly seek reassurance and shift the work right back up to you.
We also see teams over-relying on complex jargon. Watch out for those dense, confusing reports. Jargon is so often used as a shield to mask a lack of actual critical thinking. Finally, watch for bias and skewed advice, where departmental agendas start overriding objective data.
Piecemeal tendency. This happens when staff starts submitting fragments the second a task gets difficult. As a manager, watch out for sudden, unscheduled, quick question meetings. That is very often the piecemeal tendency in disguise. Then there's a lack of psychological safety. If your staff fear making mistakes, they're going to constantly seek reassurance and shift the work right back up to you. We also see teams over-relying on complex jargon. Watch out for those dense, confusing reports. Jargon is so often used as a shield to mask a lack of actual critical thinking. Finally, watch for bias and skewed advice, where departmental agendas start overriding objective data.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, Sustainable Success. To counter those pitfalls we just talked about and lock this culture in permanently, you need a really clear roadmap built on 3 main pillars. First up, establish feedback loops by holding post-project CSW reviews. Now, the key here is to do this without completely destroying team morale. Frame the review as an audit of the process, not an attack on the person. Ask constructive questions like, hey, where in the workflow did we lose clarity? So you can analyze exactly where the ping pong happened. Second, you gotta reward candor, growth, and initiative. When someone consistently passes the signature test and delivers really complete work, give them more responsibility and more visibility. Finally, encourage teaching roles. Turn your absolute best problem solvers into internal coaches. This reinforces the rigorous standards for them while at the same time elevating the rest of your unit.
I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative challenge today. We call it the one shift. I want you to identify just one recurring task this week that usually results in one of those endless, agonizing email chains and demand CSW principles for it. Just tell your team, look, don't bring me a problem to discuss, bring me a solution to approve. It's time to stop managing half-done work and start approving completed excellence. Build that culture of reliability and start today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you all next time.
Did you learn something new and exciting about completed staff work and how to do it right? Share it here. I want to know about it too.
This video was researched with Perplexity, processed with Notebook LM, refined with Google Workspace, Gemini, and Copilot, and finalized with DaVinci Resolve and Canva.